Hello and welcome back to the Nothing to Something podcast. Now, the regulars will know by now that this is the podcast that's been put together as a platform to share real stories from real people, showcasing their journeys towards success and all the struggles involved along the way. Really helping you guys to understand that success is a game of attrition, to understand that the path towards success is not a linear one, to understand that if you show up, commit consistently, daily, every single day, then it's only a matter of time before you reach your goals. Now, guys, if you're not already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening on. This is going to provide you with all the top draw content to come, as well as keeping me pushing to produce it. Now, today's episode is all about brain health, cognitive function, and performance. I personally class myself as a high performer. I have done for some time now. You've got to have that belief, but it also comes behind putting the work in on a day-to-day. Now, to be able to perform highly and consistently, I need to ensure that I'm in the best possible position to do so. So similar to training physically, if you want to be in the best possible space for physical performance, there are certain fundamentals that you take care of on a day-to-day basis. For example, you're going to train hard consistently. You're going to make sure you hydrate. You might take stimulants. You might take pre-workouts. You're going to make sure you've got the right training equipment around you. The list goes on. You're going to make sure all these things are in this framework in place for you to succeed. Now, the same thing goes for brains. It goes for our brains. It goes for our cognitive performance. Today, I'm going to give you some absolute top tips that you can implement straight into your day-to-day. That's going to prime you to have your brain in the best possible position to stay healthy and perform highly. Right, top tips for brain health and cognitive performance. Now, for some of you guys, it won't be a surprise to know that I'm going to start with food here. I'm a massive foodie, but with good reason. So when I say food, I mean eating the right foods, the right food items, but also the right macronutrients, and also at the right times. All of the above can have a significant impact on your brain's ability to function, to stay sharp, to have clarity of thought. There's a load of benefits that go along with it. So when we're talking about top foods for brain health and cognitive performance, I've got to start with blueberries. Blueberries are an absolute favourite of mine. So much so, in fact, that the only person I know that loves blueberries more than me is my 18-month-old daughter Nala, and we don't put a cap on how much she has. We don't limit them, and with good reason. So blueberries have got an absolute plethora of health benefits, some of which are actually geared towards the brain. So in addition to the fact that they're low calorie, they're very low on a glycemic index, which means that they don't give you a massive insulin spike, even when consumed in reasonably high volume. They're massively nutrient dense, they're an antioxidant, sort of the list goes on and on and on, the benefits to blueberries. So blueberries and other deeply coloured berries, they have what we call anthocyanins, which is a mouthful, which is a compound of in plants which contains anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. Now, these anthocyanins contribute towards slowing brain aging, slowing neurodegenerative diseases. There's another mouthful. There's a hell of a lot of benefits that go along with these. So these are known to accumulate within the brain when consumed within foods that contain them, and they work towards improving communication between neurons or between cells within the brain, essentially. A little bit like the way neuroplasticity works. So there've also been numerous studies, we do like the scientifically backed stuff, as I get into from time to time, to show now that blueberries can help improve memory and certain cognitive processes, especially in children and in older adults. So there we go. First and foremost, blueberries, an absolute plethora of benefits. If you're not already, get them into your diet. So the next item on our list that's going to improve brain health and cognitive performance, and more so the performance aspect with this one, is coffee. I know the coffee addicts, a little bit like myself, will be buzzing now when they hear this. But coffee actually contains obviously caffeine, but also antioxidants, which can ultimately help support brain health by increasing stimulation and also increasing alertness, sharpness of thought, concentration, etc. That's probably no surprise to most people. But then the antioxidant properties can reduce the risk of neurological diseases such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. There's been a hell of a lot of studies in semi-recent years that allude to these facts, so you can check them out within peer-reviewed studies online like PubMed and things like that. So during these studies, one of the largest reductions was seen in adults who consumed 3 to 4 cups a day, which can be a lot for certain people. I'm going to put in a bit of a disclaimer here. Please be careful. Please know your personal tolerance. the benefits of the coffee are not going to outweigh the benefits of getting regular sufficient sleep. So please know yourself, don't overdo it. You still want to be getting the benefits of this, but getting a good night's sleep at the end of the day so you can get the best of both worlds. So we've just talked about we've talked about coffee increasing alertness. So the caffeine keeps your brain alert by blocking adenosine. Adenosine's a chemical receptor or chemical messenger within the brain that makes you sleepy. So when you block it, you feel more alert. Pretty much what it says on the tin. This is how we know that coffee works. Now, we've all been in a position where we felt tired, we've had a coffee, or we've dropped an espresso, something like that, a double espresso, and reasonably quickly we start to perk up. That's because of what we just talked about there, because we've now blocked them adenosine receptors. It blocks out the tiredness. Now, I don't want to spoil the party at this stage, but it would be remiss of me not to mention here that there have been quite a few recent studies outlining the fact that having your first cup of coffee within the first hour or so of waking can actually have detrimental effects. Now, the way that works is if you consume your first cup of coffee or your first portion of caffeine within, say, 60 to 90 minutes of first waking up in the morning, the block effect that it has on your adenosine receptors within the first hour could result in you having worse sleep that night. So ideally, to get the best of both worlds and get your alertness from the caffeine and all the other benefits we've just talked about there, but also getting a good night's sleep that same night, you should be aiming to be awake for an hour or more before you have your first dose of caffeine for the day if you want to sleep well that night. Now, I could go on and on with the food list here, but some other foods to bear in mind that have massive cognitive effects, brain health effects, and sort of cognitive performance. I've got to mention a few. I won't get into finer details, but a few others to include would be the likes of nuts and seeds, the likes of broccolis, the likes of dark chocolate. The darker the better. I personally have 85%, but it all depends on your taste and tolerance. Turmeric's absolutely fantastic. Fatty fish, which contains your omega-3s, which you can also supplement, and the list goes on. If you want a bit more information on those, you can Google them. Brain benefits, cognitive benefits from foods, and just see what pops up there for you. Before we step away from foods altogether and the benefits of foods towards brain health and cognitive performance, I need to mention another major factor in the food category. So one of the best things that you can do, and is easy to do, to ensure you have strong and consistent high cognitive performance throughout your day is to keep your blood sugars stable. Keep your blood sugars stable so we're not crashing throughout the day and getting them lows. So the best way to do this is either by working in a fasted state or having no carbs or even low protein. And yes, I did say protein there for all the gym heads. We know that carbs give you an insulin spike. Protein can do the same. It can spike blood sugars. It can create an insulin response, although not as high as carbs. And when we come down from that, we tend to get a bit of a lull. We crash. We feel a little bit tired. Brain scans or MRIs on the brain have shown, when you get the little picture of the brain on the screens, they've shown certain areas of the brain light up in response to different foods, and protein does get a response for certain things. And what we want to do in this instance is keep it consistent. We want consistent performance from all parts of the brain because we want to perform highly and consistently. So with that in mind, when I personally know I've got big events coming up, when I've got a big day, when I know I'm going to important meetings, when I know I'm delivering presentations or speaking, keynote speaking or anything like that, if I'm doing a bit of filming, I always try to do this in a fasted state. My method would be to be fasted, to be hydrated, and I usually have some caffeine in my system as well. I'll have a copy or a couple of cups of coffee depending on what time of the morning I'm getting into this deep work and this need for a hyper alert state. That way I know I'm going to be alert, I know I'm going to be focused, I know my cognitive function is going to be at its highest, and I know that I can perform consistently well throughout the period that I need to perform. So next up in our list of things that are going to support brain health and cognitive performance. So this time we're going to get into heat and cold. We're going to get into heat and cold, and we're going to start with sauna first off. So the sauna now has been proven to increase blood flow and circulation. Now what that does, and the benefits to that, is that it provides more oxygen to the brain as we'd normally get. It helps in flushing out pollutants and sort of antioxidant effect. And it also increases, once again, cognitive performance. Now, the other benefits of this is that it relaxes you. It can create a reduction in cortisol levels. It aids in balancing your mood and stress. We love, and we've talked about in the past on this podcast, the science-backed stuff. So once again, talking about studies, there have been some great studies stating that there are extensive evidence now showing that people who use a sauna on at least a semi-regular basis And numbers that were outlined were 50 plus minutes per week. You could argue that's high usage rather than semi-high usage. See an absolute plethora once again of benefits, including mental health and well-being benefits, as well as all of the above, as well as the antioxidant effects, as well of flushing the pollutants out of the brain, as improved circulation, and just all over cognitive performance, improving cognitive performance. So we're going to switch straight from our heat into the cold. Cold exposure has been once again scientifically proven through studies to significantly increase the production of neurochemicals like epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, sort of the things we've talked about in previous episodes essentially. Now these neurochemicals are produced when you're exposed to cold, and these things produce things like increased focus, increased attention, alertness, improved mood, all these things that you could do with, as we talked about in the morning episode, to set you up nicely for the day. Now, cold exposure has also been proven to increase BDNF production. So BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is what it's abbreviation for, is a key module involved in sort of neuroplasticity, so the plastic changes relating to learning and memory within the brain. So if you're somebody like me who likes to learn and take in new things, but also wants to retain them, I feel like I read a lot, take in a lot of content, but don't retain as much as I'd like to. This is something that can support in that neuroplasticity, and we'll get into another key benefit to that a little bit later on. But if you're someone who just wants to slow down the aging of the brain and have brain performance into later stages of life, then again, this is for you. The production of BDNF is only going to benefit you. Now, as I've just touched on neuroplasticity and specifically BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, I'll just quickly touch on learning and again creating those new neural pathways within the brain. So it's been proven in recent years that there is a better way to learn. This wasn't about back in my day, GCSEs, cramming for exams and all the rest of it, but this has been proven through recent studies. So in recent studies, we've learned that the best way to learn is to take in large amounts of information, is to go hard with an intense learning session and follow that up with some extreme rest. So the best way to do that would be to essentially cram or learn, read, take in the content you need to take in an intense fashion, learn, focus. Then off the back of that, immediately follow that up with either sleep or deep rest, something like NSDR or non-sleep deep rest, where you're in a sort of a very rested rate but not actually sleeping, where the brain's at total rest and it can give all these things a chance to kick in. Now with that in mind, the old school tactics of staying up all night, as I just said there before, you've got exams, cramming all night and then going in to do your exams off a couple of hours sleep. There are probably not many worse tactics out there, but as I've just said there, new studies have shown that if you do want to learn and retain the information you learn, then the best way to do that is by periods of intense, deep learning, immediately followed by periods of intense or deep rest, or NSDR, non-sleep, deep rest, so all of that can sink in. Next up, we've got training. Now, this is something I've personally played with over the years. As someone who's trained 4+ days per week for well over a decade, and someone who trains every day now, I train 7 days a week, I still train when I've got a cognitive demanding day looming. If I've got big meetings, if I've got important meetings, if I'm interviewing, if I'm presenting, if I'm filming, whatever it may be, and however alert I need to be and on the ball I need to be, I still train. Now again, back to the studies. We love the studies and things that are scientifically backed. Recent studies have shown that increased blood flow, specifically from HIIT training, increases activity in the hippocampus within the brain, which plays a major part in learning and memory. Now, HIIT training specifically, and HIIT training over other forms of training, has been shown to produce large amounts of BDNF. So we talked about BDNF earlier on, and BDNF again is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That's what it's abbreviation for. It'll leave you on a cognitive high for as long as 6+ hours. So after you've been in, you've done your HIIT workout, you know you've got a large day looming where you've got to be on the ball, you've got to perform high from a cognitive standpoint. It'll leave you in a good position to go out and smash the important things you've got to do that day. With that being said, don't overdo it. Anyone who's trained in a HIIT fashion before, or high intensity interval training before, knows that you don't do hours and hours of HIIT training. 15 to 30 minutes is sufficient. That's enough to get a good workout in, to leave you in a high position of cognition, performing highly cognitively, but not overly fatigued. You're trying to find that balance point between being alert, releasing that BDNF so the brain's in full flow. We're getting a lot of production out of the hippocampus, as we've talked about there in the brain, but we're also alert because we're producing those neurotransmitters that we talked about earlier on in the episode. So hit training over anything else if you want to train in the morning and you know you've got a cognitively demanding day looming that same day. So there you have it, some real life super hacks that are cheap, or in some cases even free, and are easily accessible to each and every one of us and can improve our brain health and cognitive performance. Grab them, drop them straight into your routine, and away we go. Now, before I wrap things up, please remember, guys, that there is absolutely no substitute for daily exercise, sunlight exposure, good natural food consumption, healthy social interactions with positive people. These are the foundations and the fundamentals that our success is built on. So get these things in first. These are the starting blocks. And all these tips and tricks and hacks that I'm putting out now are things that are going to complement our foundation, so to speak. Guys, this has been the Nothing to Something podcast. If you've not already, then please like, subscribe to the channel, share the content, and I'll see you all soon.